All right, it looks like it's about 10:15 by my clock, so we've got some invitations in the chat already to have your dogs come be guest speakers.
The one, the little one's annoying, so.
So I want to welcome everybody back. Thank you for choosing to come to this session. This is tips for securing a teaching position. As I think you probably heard Tracy mention before we got off, this session is recorded just so that you know. We have a panel of speakers, three folks from our local partner district schools who are going to tell you about themselves in just a moment and what their roles are sort of in this process. We've got a few questions for them, and then I think we'll probably have some time at the end to answer some questions that you all may have. So I think thank you again for coming this morning. We're very, very fortunate to have our panel here with us. We've got Jerry Bell from Springfield Schools, Dr. Lori Reffert, who you already heard from this morning from Toledo Public Schools, and Brent Swartzmiller from Perrysburg Schools. And they've requested, if you're available to put your camera on, they'd love to see your faces, but certainly it's not a requirement. Yeah, I think that's it. Are you guys ready to get started? Fantastic. So I'll let you choose what order you'd like to go in, but if you could first tell us just a little bit about yourself and what got you into education, and please mention your titles because I knew I was going to get them wrong. So I'm going to let you say them yourselves.
Go ahead.
Well,
Brent.
I'm Jerry. Go ahead, Lori.
Go, Jerry. No, go ahead. Go, Jerry.
Okay. I'm Jerry Bell, and I am the secondary curriculum director at Springfield Local Schools. I am starting my third year in Springfield Local. I spent my first 24 years at Washington Local in various roles from a fifth grade teacher to seventh grade teacher, eighth grade teacher, dean of students, head football coach, PBIS coordinator, you name it. I've probably done it in Washington Local, and I'm looking to do that the same thing in this role at Springfield. One thing that I will tell you that why I got into education is the influences of not only my coaches, but my fifth grade teacher at Monac Elementary. And still to this day, I still talk to her, and I still talk to the coaches that have influenced me throughout my life. And they were great role models for me. And as a sophomore in high school back in late 1980s, I found that passion to be a teacher. And one thing that I strive for, and I'm currently the head football coach at Springfield, and I say that last because what I strive for is to make sure everybody understands that I'm an educator first and a football coach second. And that is one thing that has driven me my entire career, is to break that stigmatism of a coach and making sure that everybody understands that I'm a teacher and I'm an educator and a professional, and I do what is best for kids. And I don't want people to think that I put coaching ahead of anything, because that is my secondary position. So that is one thing that I pride myself in, and I wanted to share with that part in my opening to you.
Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, I am Lori Reffert, Senior Director of Talent Acquisition and Management for Toledo Public Schools. That's the big fancy title for I'm in charge of all hiring for the fourth largest district in the state of Ohio. We have about 2,200 teachers and about 4,400 employees. We have approximately 56 schools from early childhood to magnet high schools. I started teaching in 1995. I graduated from Ohio State. I'm from the area. I went to Clay High School. I always wanted to be a teacher. My father and mother, I was a first generation college student, convinced me not to. They said, no, we want you to be a lawyer, a doctor, whatever. Actually, my first degree is in landscape architecture, but that's a whole nother story. Decided to go back in education. And I've been did not want to come back to Toledo, but I was offered a job 5 days before school started. And 26 years later, I've been a 7th grade English teacher. I was a dean of students at Jones Junior High. I was assistant principal at Start High School. I was principal at Arlington Elementary School for 8 years, and then I was recruited into human resources about 6 years ago. I received my doctorate in 2008 so that I could go to an elementary principal since my license is 7 to 12 English. Actually just renewed both licenses yesterday through LPDC. So we're lifelong learners. It's my first time. I'd never took a class. I did 180 contact hours. Turned it all in yesterday. It was approved this morning. I love what I do. Going along with what Jerry said, we're educators. Doesn't matter what position you're in. You're always an educator. We're lifelong learners. Like I said earlier, I'm not a morning person, but I wouldn't pass up the chance to have this opportunity to do anything with Project Impact because it's an amazing program, and BG is one of our most, one of the partners I like working with the most.
So I'm going to apologize if I freeze suddenly. I don't know whether I'm going to be zapped out at the 23rd minute or I'm going to be safe. Our internet's been acting crazy. So I'll start with my name is Brent Swartzmiller. I'm Executive Director of Teaching and Learning for Perrysburg Schools. I got an education probably for the opposite reason of most. I personally did not like the school experience that I had. I saw a lot of hypocrisy. I saw a lot of playing a game where some people were valued and not all were valued. And so I got into it more from being a advocate for all students being feeling valued and relevant, which led to a lot of my involvement in PBIS and anti-bullying and such. I think that school culture and coming to school and feeling like a valuable human being are very important. And so I am in my 27th year, started at Fremont City Schools, went to Elmwood Schools for a bit, and then to Maumee, and then now I saw the light and I'm in Perrysburg. I have fulfilled many roles, starting as 6th grade teacher to assistant principal at a junior high, to elementary principal, to 2 crazy years as Maumee High School athletic director. I don't know what I was thinking. Ran from that, went back to the elementary school for 7, and then was talked into going to a junior high. And then this is my 5th year as executive director of teaching and learning. So my role in hiring in our school district, we like to interview a lot. We like to date before we marry, I guess. And so we have a screener, and then a second round of screening is with me and principal.
And that may be
There
him
must be 23.
freezing.
It is. It's 10:23. Brent froze.
All right. Well, he did warn us.
He did.
So I imagine he'll probably pop out and pop back on. But to keep our conversation going, I'll ask the 2 of you here, what to kind of stick with Lori, what you started with on a positive note, what's the best thing about teaching?
So, I think one of the best things about teaching, kind of going along with what Brent said too, I forgot to mention, I went into teaching, because I wanted to make a difference, but also I had a 7th grade teacher that she was the worst thing ever. And I wanted to be the opposite of her. So, the best thing about teaching, I think, is the relationships. It's being able to make those relationships with kids and families and colleagues, and, making a difference and getting them to understand that there is somebody who cares about them. Every day is different. If you expect to go into education, like Missy said, you kind of have a plan. But, as student teachers, some of you, I'm sure, are student teachers, we know that those plans change very quickly. But, again, it's about relationships and getting, being able to make a difference in kids' lives. I know that's cliche, but that's why we do it.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
And he's back. It was 10:23 when you froze.
It's amazing. So it won't happen again unless we're on here for another hour. Sorry. What did I miss?
Well, we transitioned to our next question, but you're welcome to finish your thought if you wish. I just asked what the best thing about teaching is.
Yeah, I think the best thing in my mind is the impact and relevancy that we have on the lives of students. there's a lot to, sometimes we get bombarded with a lot of criticism, a lot of folks not knowing what we do, but we have the most important job in the world. We impact thousands and thousands of kids across our career. So don't ever forget the impact we have, and we are giving kids a chance. You know, the fact that we can have an impact and kids can have a chance to fulfill their dreams because of us, I think we should not take lightly.
And Jerry, did you have something you wanted to share, a favorite thing about teaching?
Yeah, one thing I forgot to tell you is that I was a elementary principal for 4 years. I don't know why I would forget that. But I will say is it is, and I agree with Lori and Brent. It's the relationships and that rapport that you build. And I shared when I first got on here that we're moving my sister-in-law this morning, and I have two young men who are helping us do this move, and they were former students of mine, and they're here to help me, and it comes down to that lifelong relationship that you build with the kids as you have them in your classroom. And no matter what the red tape is, no matter what the state asks you to do, and all the extra workload that is placed upon your plate, at the end of the day, it's all about the relationships that you have within your classroom, and don't underestimate the relationship that you have with your colleagues. And for me, that's what it's all about. We had a death of a teacher at my former school just last week due to COVID issues, and haven't been there in 3 years. And I walked in that building like it was home, and to support that staff, and that staff will always be my family. And that's what you take out of this, is the impact that you have not only on your students, but on your colleagues and the people around you every single day, no matter what is being asked of you of the state. And one thing I'll say is I've never complained about the pay, and I've never complained about the schedule. It's all about the kids and that rapport, and your colleagues and that rapport.
And thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
We have our audience here, I think, is mostly, if not entirely, teacher candidates, excited thinking about that first position. So I wonder if y'all could share with us what the districts tend to look for in teacher candidates.
Well, I can tell you I'm sorry, Lori.
No, go ahead, Jerry. No, you're fine. I just, I hate that pause where nobody's talking.
No kid. It's that awkward silence that you're like, well, for me, I've had the honor to work for in my opinion, two great school districts, with Washington Local and with Springfield. And when you look at both school districts, even though some of the day-to-day operations are different, at the end of the day, what they're looking for in a teacher is the same thing. It's that passion. It's that are you willing to do what's best for kids and put kids at the forefront, and build those rapports with them. That is what we're looking for first. And in my mind, when we are looking at teacher candidates, when we're looking at substitutes, it's all about, do we get this feeling that this candidate will be able to make the connections, and will be able to put kids first, and do those things at a high standard. Do they have great character qualities? But then everything else, in my mind, we can teach you everything else when it comes to the curriculum, when it comes to the resources. But it's all about that character piece. It's all about that, whether or not we get that feeling and that sense that you have a passion to be a teacher, and you have the passion to teach kids and to make a difference in that classroom.
I absolutely agree with that. As I said earlier, we're the 4th largest district in the state. So while Brent said that they have 3 or 4 different rounds or whatever, for screening, we do screen. We look closely at references. We don't have the luxury of being able to do 4 rounds of interviews just because of the amount of people that we're interviewing for positions. But going with what Jerry said, we're looking for that personality. We're looking for the passion. We're looking for, you want to be here. We are an urban district, but we have, we go from fully 100% free and reduced lunch to, we have 3 schools in our district that are not on Title I. And I want to know that you want to be here for my kids. They're my kids. While I might not be in the classroom anymore, I'm still hiring you as a sub, as a para, as a bus driver. How are you going to make a difference for my kids? All of my students are entitled to the best teacher that they can have. And that's what we look for. We look for your personality. We look for your passion. Granted, you need to know pedagogy, but we can teach you. We can teach you. I want to make sure that you're there, you want to stay, you're not leaving, and you care every day about what's going on, in our schools and with our kids. Especially, things change on a daily basis. And if I need you to make that commitment. That's what I'm looking for.
So when you go third after 2 really smart people, you can say ditto. But I definitely think I agree with all of those points. The only thing that I would add is we try very hard through our questioning to determine whether somebody is student first versus teacher first. You got to be student first. I think we look at resilience, we look at evidence of commitment. To Lori's point about wanting to be here, we look for folks that do their homework. I mean, know about us. Nothing's a bigger turnoff in an interview than somebody saying, well, I'm not sure how you do this. Well, do you want us? Because in this day and age of information, you can find a whole lot about the place you want to be. And so evidence of showing homework in that step in that direction before an interview goes a long way. And just evidence of resilience. I mean, telling stories of overcoming, learning, having a growth mindset, grinding, and commitment to working with kids, whether it be through volunteer experiences or experiences with kids, jumps out. That's what we want. We don't want your first experiences as a teacher being some of your very first experiences with working with kids. People that want to go in our business should have hours working with kids already because they have a passion for doing it.
That's, I think that leads us really well into the next question of what is it that these folks can be doing now as undergraduates in their as teacher candidates at this point to set themselves apart as you're looking at them as candidates in the next year or 2?
I would say get involved as much as you can. And I know your schedules are tight. I know that, most of you are probably working and doing those things. But, the other day I was talking to a potential teacher candidate, and the vibe I got from them was that they really weren't interested in, really seeing the profession through. Because they were making excuse after excuse why they couldn't get involved and why they couldn't do things. And I'm telling you right now, from my experience, get involved, learn as much as you can right now. Go in and volunteer in classrooms, and then as you go in those classrooms, imagine yourself being in that classroom and what would my classroom look like? Take away the things that you see inside that space, or whether you're going in and working and volunteering at the Y, same thing. Envision yourself there as being that leader, and what would it look like under your watch, and start to build that in your mind of what it would be like as you running those programs or being that teacher. But right now, my piece to you is get involved as much as you can. So volunteering in the schools, doing tutoring sessions, what have you, volunteer at the Y, making sure that you are interacting with kids right now, because the more the experience that you get now to deal with the type of student that we have, the better it's going to be for you in that first year of teaching. Because I'm not gonna lie, that first year of teaching or first 5-year teaching, it's going to be a challenge. But the more that you can get yourself to that experience and put yourself in that, the better it's going to be for you in the long run. So when I started, I was 15 years old when I first started coaching my first basketball team, and I got the experience of how to deal with kids and manage kids, and I haven't looked back since. And that's what I suggest to you as well.
ahead, Brent.
Yeah, I would agree with Jerry. It's the grind. It's getting involved. And the second part, I think, is read. I mean, the most successful people in the world take the time to read. And I'll even give you a couple books. There's a book called Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss, which is incredible. He goes through and asks the same 10 questions of very successful people in a variety of fields. And the underlying thing is they made the time to read, read, and read. And then the other book that I'd recommend is that I just finished is called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And it's about deep practice, about learning your craft and spending thousands of hours in your craft. And that's when you become an expert in your field. And when we say grind and volunteer and getting involved, that's where that 10,000 hours comes into play. The more time you do it, the better you are. You need to jump in and do it. And quite frankly, if you have excuses about not having the time, we find the time for things we most value. So, and it stands out. If you don't value it enough, then maybe that's a look in the mirror. I mean, it is a matter of, are you investing time in your passion? We want passionate people. So, sorry, go ahead, Lori.
No, that's actually what I was going to talk about, is you will find time for the things that you are passionate about. I'm the mom of a child with special needs. He's now 20. I worked on my doctorate when my boys were little. I ran for school board for Perrysburg, and people were like, how are you going to find the time? I said, because this is important to me. This is affecting change in, keeping in what we've been doing, inclusion, diversity, equity. I had to walk my talk. You have to find the time. You will find the time, not have to. You will find the time for things that you care about. In the course of 27 years, I've always found the time, even now, excuse me, to be involved in things that affect kids. I was on the Autism Society of Northwest Ohio's board. I was a coach for Challenger Baseball. I volunteer in Special Olympics. I help out at the library. I volunteered at my kids' school. Go into BG, and most of you are BG if you're not already an educator. There are opportunities at BG to get involved with kids. Not just university kids. There's Rally Cap Sports, if you haven't heard about that has a chapter at BG. There's Best Buddies program, chapter in BG. There's Wood County Special Olympics. There's Bowling Green City Schools. Everybody has something where they need volunteers. Going into one of the elementary schools and being a reading buddy, anything that you can do, sign up at the library. But we want to see that you have been working with kids, even if it's a babysitter or a nanny over the summer for the family, something where you're passionate about kids. You can be passionate about books. You like reading. I'm an English teacher or was an English teacher. You can be passionate about math. You can be passionate about science. But if you are not passionate about kids, this is the wrong profession for you. You have to put kids first. It's all about students first. Everything you do is a student-centered decision, and everything around that you do has to be about students. So do I ask you to breathe, eat, live 24/7 about kids? No, but you need to be involved and you need to be passionate, because if you lose that passion, you're not going to be good for anybody, yourself, your family, or your students.
If I may insert real fast, I have a piece of wood that's painted that says "Feed your passion," and that is in my office. And every single day when I walk in, that's what I look at, and that's what it's about: is feeding that passion that you have to do this job, because it's not going to be easy, but keep that passion alive, and it will make it a whole lot better. And then the other thing I'm going to just piggyback off Lori real fast is, you also have to remember, this job doesn't end at 3 o'clock when that bell rings or whatever. This job continues, and you need to be there, when for your kids, if there's issues that pop up or whatever, you have to be there. So you have to remember that you just don't clock out at 3 o'clock. This job will continue some days until 7, 8 o'clock. So you have to be prepared for that.
And I don't think any of our 3 districts want you if your day ends at that time. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that matches really well with what Missy was saying earlier, that, we do give so much to our students, and that availability, and then, still finding the time to do the things that feed us and take care of ourselves. So I think that's a great message. How about skills? What kinds of skills are really important for new teachers?
That's a great question. What kind of skills are important for new teachers? Resilience. You have to be resilient. Resiliency is important. You have to be able to think quickly on your feet. You have to be with it. Back in the day, I'm pretty sure Jerry and Brent, you're about my age. So it was the big thing was with itness. You need to know what's going on in your classroom. If you're going to have 20 some kids, you need to know what A, B, C, D, E, F, G to Z is doing all times. I used to tell my kids I have eyes in the back of my head. You have to figure out ways to do that. You have to be global. You have to see what's going on, and you just have to be open, positive, and just being, willing and wanting to learn. You can't come into your first teaching job like you know everything. I mean, you know a lot, you do, but what kills me is, I'll see a resume and your resume is like 8 pages long. Okay. I've been in education for 27 years. I have 4 college degrees. My resume is not 8 pages long. Okay. It could be 8 pages long, but nobody wants to read an 8-page resume, So don't go in thinking you know everything, but also don't go in being afraid to not make a difference.
I agree with you because my first job was 2 days after I graduated from the University of Toledo, and in 1996, and I walked into the classroom thinking, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm prepared. Guess what? I wasn't. I put all these rules of don't do this on the board, and it was an automatic failure. So, when I look at a skill set for you, that I'm looking for in a teacher, is that you need to be a fantastic multitasker. You have to be able to manage, multiple things at one time. And you don't have to be great at it, but you have to be pretty darn good at it. And but that multitasking piece is for sure that. And then that willingness to, be critical of yourself and to be open-minded to, new things and not just necessarily just be set, ever be set in your way. You have to be that, what we talked about already is that, that constant learner. You are constantly learning and evolving at, to the needs of your children. And so that's what that's what I would say the skill set would be, those main things, besides the other things we've talked about with your character pieces and that. But you got to be pretty darn good multitasker. I'm not the most organized person, but I'm decent at organization. So, organizational skills are definitely a piece of that as well.
Yeah, I think going in with eyes wide open, knowing that, like we stated earlier, this is the hardest job. It's the hardest job. It's the hardest job people have, dealing with, 25 to 30 plus, whatever you're blessed to have in your room, very unique personalities coming from very unique situations, not knowing what their day's like before they come to you or after they come to you. It's just a very profoundly hard job. I like using the word confidently humble. We want someone who's confident in what they're doing, assertive in their action, based on the knowledge they're doing what's best for the students in front of them, but humble in knowing that they're not going to have all the answers, and every day is a learning experience. And we want seekers of improvement, seekers of wanting to be better, and knowing that there's no perfect day, there's no perfect way. It's just responding to the needs in front of you. And you're going to have bad days, you're going to have challenging days, but you're going to have a lot of wins along the way. And it's just writing it out and knowing that each day you have the ability to make a difference.
Great, thank you all. So let's shift, if we could, to thinking about sort of the application and interview process, because I'm sure that's on some folks' minds. how can teacher candidates make their applications stand out? And I'm going to add a second question there. Should they be preparing portfolios? Is that something that's part of the process? And if so, what should be included there?
We're gonna get 3 different answers here.
Yep. And that's why I think it's good to
Yep.
have you all
right,
to understand
so-
that they'll be different.
So I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure, well, we switched from Frontline, our Frontline application system to Talent Ed last February, because it speaks to all of our other programs in the district. So I'm not sure, Brent and Jerry, what you guys use, but most people around here use Frontline. So you're going to be able to use a lot of that stuff. You're going to have to take the time to set up your account. What I look for when we screen is I look for a resume. For us, I always look at letters of reference or your references. So if you're going to use somebody as a reference, make sure they're going to give you a good reference. Make sure that you're using your cooperating teacher or the principal of that building. I start to get a little concerned when I don't see supervisors on there and they don't match their resume. Make sure you spell check. Make sure you grammar check. There, and there all have different purposes. 2, 2, and 2 all have different purposes. I don't know what it is. I cannot balance my checkbook, but man, if you spell something wrong, my eye is right there. And I'm thinking, you're going to be teaching my kids? You're going to be teaching my students. Boom. If you don't have the time to check to make sure you spelled everything right, that's an issue. Also know who is in charge of hiring. Look at your letters. Don't send me a letter that says, "Dear Springfield Schools." That means you didn't even take the time to change that. Back in the day, we used to have to send resumes. We didn't do any of this. We had to do letters. We had to type them out. Make sure you're taking the time to look at the details. Don't fluff your resume. Like I said, you don't have 8 pages of experience. You may think you do, but you don't. Like Brent said, confidently humble. But put in those experiences about what you've done with kids. And when I look for it, I don't have time for portfolios. We don't have time for that. If you want to bring something in, we might quickly look at it. If you want to reference it in an interview, when you ask a question or, when we get to that point, make sure you're using I statements. Don't say my cooperating teacher or I helped my cooperating teacher. It's just the attention to detail is what we look for the first time around when you get in for an interview with us.
Jerry, you want to go? Or we're dancing. I would agree with the presentation, grammatical errors, things like that. But I guess I would add, the diversity of experience that we spoke to, the learning opportunities that you can mention in detail. I would go a step further even and mention how you are in public and social media. I'll be honest with you. I stalk candidates. I do. I look, I Google, I see if they're on social media, I see what they're posting. Why? Because we can. I want to know as much about the people we're getting in a relationship as possible. And if there's some questionable stuff out there, there's a lot of fish in the sea. We'll keep fishing. We're not going to go there. You got to be careful. You got to represent. To hit a little bit more on Lori's point about references, one of the things we're having a hard time with right now is getting people that are references to call us back. I mean, just, hey, I put you on the list. You got to call back. You got to get back to us. I think it's all important. It's all important in the packaging. In terms of portfolio, I don't think it matters much what you have in the portfolio, to be honest with you. I think it's how you use the portfolio in the course of your conversation. I know Jerry was a very successful coach, and I dabbled in it a little bit. I do believe in visualization. I believe in walking things through in your mind. I think that if you visualize how you're answering questions and how you're incorporating your portfolio in the conversation with examples, it's a powerful, powerful tool. What I don't like is, oh yeah, I brought this with me. You want to look through it? No, I don't have time to look through it. But if you reference it and show us your work in the course of conversation, I have seen portfolios definitely separate some candidates from others, but it's how they used it in that conversation, not the glossy border or what, kind of binder it's in. It's through the conversation. And so I just think when you're selling yourself, how are you selling yourself? There was a commercial, you only have one chance to make a first impression. It's real. If you got a grammatical error, or you're not selling yourself, or it also isn't really the time to be super humble. You want to put out and boast the things you do. Just don't look like a know-it-all, So sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
You're 100% correct. So, I agree with both of them. It comes down to those attention, those details, those little things that you do. I'm not looking for that big flashy resume. All the things I'm looking for is, the things that substance that you have on that resume. When it comes to some leadership pieces, you're volunteering. I'm looking for those, and then when you get that opportunity to come into the interview, Brent kept talking about conversation. I feel like that's one of my biggest skill sets, is to be able to walk in a room and control the room. And that's what I take on in every interview that I've ever had. I go in there and I control the room. I want to lead them to where I want them to go and get the answers. I thrive on the fact of getting them off script, because we all walk in there with a script in hand. And then once I get you off the script and get you to be able to have a conversation about the things that I want you to get from me and to get you to know me, that's when I've won the room. That's when I've won the interview. And I want you to understand that, but you have to do all the preparation ahead of time. Everything that you do is all about preparing ahead of time and coming in there. If you want to have a portfolio, you can have it. We're not going to be looking at the portfolio in detail ahead of time. At Springfield, you can put it in digital. We're not going to be able to look at it ahead of time with everything we have. But, as Brett said, walk in there. Every interview I've walked into, I've walked in there with something, but I've used that as the tool to guide the conversation. Not that here's an afterthought, or, I hand it to them right away, and I'll say to them, please don't, you can then start looking through it. And when they start looking through it, they're not listening to what you have to say. So you have to time it all out just the right way. But again, I'm a visual thing, and I'm mentally preparing these things. So for you, mentally prepare yourself, put yourself in that room ahead of time, and think about how do you want to control that room, and how do you want to get those points across in a very short period of time. And once you do that, and if you can win that room by doing those things, you set yourself ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lori. Did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to go along with that. I like to see in an interview, and I started to talk about it, is make sure you give examples of things that you've done. If we ask questions, we'll ask questions about, how do you communicate with families? Don't just say email, you know what I mean? Because know your audience, know what's going on, know what happens. If you send me an email, it gets buried. Kate knows. Kate sent something. I'm like, I don't know. I thought this was coming. I mean, I need to see it on top. I mean, I get 300, 400, 500 emails a day. I mean, so you need to use an experience. Well, I would like to, the way I build relationships with parents is by blah, blah, blah. Not what, my CMT did this. I don't want to know about your CMT. They already have a job. I want to know how you're going to use what you know in my district. And going along with what Brent said, there's so much information out there about districts. If you come to interview at TPS and you don't know who our superintendent is, shame on you. If you don't know #TPS proud and you come interview at TPS, I'm going to ask you something about it. Look at your goals, look at the core commitments, figure out how do you use some of it. Don't just quote the mission and vision, You know, how do you use the district's mission and vision? Because the 3 districts that are here right now, I know that that's what guides everything that they do. You know, everything that we do. One of our core commitments is student-centered decision making. You know, keep your student at the center. Use what you can learn about the districts and those answers, you know, and be confident in your answers. And you will be able to know if you've memorized things or if you're just having a conversation. Prepare ahead of times with a friend.
Yeah.
I do not like public speaking. I don't volunteer to do it. I also am not afraid to do it. I also don't like to sometimes I can talk off the cuff like this, but before I had to have some kind of something set down so I don't just ramble, because I tend to ramble. You know, and I was fortunate to work with Mr. Ellis when I worked on my superintendent's field experience. And he was one of the most fantastic superintendents in Toledo Public Schools in the state of Ohio. He's fantastic. He's amazing. And he always said to me, answer the question to the best of your ability. Don't ramble. Answer the question. Don't add on, because that's what gets you in trouble. Answer the question. And for 26 years, answer the question. Don't ramble. And just, you know, because that's what gets you in trouble. So, but do your research, prepare yourself. There's lots of information out there about some kind of questions. They're going to ask about differentiation. They're going to ask about, you know, relationships. They're going to ask about activities. They're going to ask about, you know, standards. You know, just make sure that you have the language. I have never seen a BGS student not be prepared for an interview.
Can I add though?
Take the time.
It's all right to pause. Don't feel the need to fill air just because there's silence. Silence is not a bad thing. It allows the interviewer's mind to rest as well as the interviewee, and it allows you to collect your thoughts and respond accordingly in answering the question that was actually proposed. That's not a bad thing. I would also add, just to follow up about knowing the school district and visualization, it probably is good to think through ways that you could do that in an effective manner that it doesn't feel wonky. I'll give you an example. I'll give you 2 examples. I'll give you an example that went good and an example went bad. When I was interviewing in Maumee, for example, they had 4 elementary schools, and I knew the four called themselves the Sisters. And so I purposely casually at one point said, I really want to know if the 3 sisters remaining want a younger brother. So they knew I did my homework. Now it could go bad because I was in another situation where I was pointing out their state data, trying to get them to understand that I knew their state data. Well, I don't think they liked it so much that I knew where there might have been a chink in their armor. So you need to really think where it may be sort of a good thing. With interviews too, I would add professionalism matters. It matters what you wear. Like I can tell you up front, I am the anti-educator in that I hate jeans days. I hate dress down days. I joke all the time. Why is Levi's so important in a teacher's mind? It is crazy to me, the joy that jeans bring. And I hate it. I hate it because I think you walk the walk and you are professional, and your out should resemble your in. And I just don't like the casual days. But I think in an interview setting, yeah, you should match. Your tie should be tied right. You shouldn't, you need to dress the part. And if you're not, you know, listen, we're getting you at your best when you're interviewing. Okay, what happens on a Thursday when you're tired? What the heck you coming in then? You know, so that matters. The other thing too, I think it's a mutual interview. I've been in interviews where I've walked out and went, no, there's no way. I didn't like the type of questions they asked. I didn't like their demeanor. I didn't like their approach. I didn't get a warm feeling. You're interviewing the school district. You're important. Like, does the district's core values and their behaviors match your core values? And if they're misaligned, run and run fast. Don't be a part of it. You might not be a match. and they might not support me. Well, everybody's going to support you. Like, think what questions are important for you that you would want to know about a district that you're signing on for. It's a relationship. So, you know.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you all for the really important information you've shared today. We're just about out of time, but I do want to throw out to our audience, were there any questions, any last thoughts you want to get from our panel? Feel free to either put it in chat or unmute yourself.
Can I just say one thing? Because you said something, you know, one of the questions was a piece of advice.
Yeah.
And can I just, this is going to drive me nuts, right? And I know my audience here, and this probably goes to against like the 5 or 6 grouchy people that come to our board meetings and want to talk and show their voice. Let me just say, equity is not a bad thing. Whatever you're hearing, turn off certain news channels or get off certain Twitter feeds. Equity is not a bad thing. We are defenders of racial justice, social justice every darn day we walk into our schools. It's not a bad thing. It is our rite of passage. It's what we do. And we shouldn't be embarrassed to say it. We shouldn't be hiding that we might get backlash. It is what we do. So you guys are equity artists when you become educators, despite what everybody wants to throw equity as being a bad thing. I think it's a badge of honor. Continue working towards that and shut the uninformed or ignorant up. So
Thank you, Mr. Swartzmiller.
I was saving that for my TNL board
Inclusion.
committee
Yeah.
with our
Inclusion
cozy
matters.
group, but what the heck? It's
Inclusion,
ridiculous.
Inclusion of everybody. Inclusion of everybody.
I'd also like to just extend out the offer if you have any further questions or you want to sit down with, and I'm sure this is, I don't want to speak necessarily for Brent and Lori, but for myself, if you want to reach out, you know, to me at Springfield, you're more than welcome to. You're more than welcome to come in. I'll take you around the building. I'll answer any questions that you have. I'd even help you through, you know, mock interview process with all the different interviews that I've gone through. You know, I'm willing to share. That's what teaching is all about. And so if you are interested in making a drive up to Springfield, it's not that far, I'd be more than happy to make time for you. And because again, that's the passion that I have, and that. But if you want to do that, that offer is extended to you.
Well,
I would agree. When we have folks that want to improve themselves, those are easy calls.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Please join me in thanking our panel for their time, for their generous offers, and for sharing their passion with us here. Project Impact typically does some mock interviews later in the spring semester, so keep an eye out for those either through simulations or sometimes with our partners. I see Lori shared her email address in the chat, so feel free to grab that if you want to reach out to her. As far as our conference structure, we're wrapping up here with breakout session 1 now. If you look back at your schedule, this is going to continue to be room 4. So if you stay here, you'll be seeing the SAMR model, but you're welcome to leave this meeting and join a different room for whichever session you're interested in for breakout session 2, which will begin at 11:15. So you've got another short break and then you can choose your next breakout session.
Thanks for having us, Kate.
Thanks so much, panelists. Thanks
joining
for
us,
sharing
you
your
guys.
info. Thank you, teacher candidates, for joining us. Great to see you.
Jerry, legs. Use your legs.
I will. I promise.
Yeah.
I
Bend
may
at the
take another
knees,
break.
Jerry. Bend at the knees.
Thank you. See you guys.
See ya.